Hi, this is Jeff Kober, and we welcome you to Disney Insights. Season's greetings and happy holidays. This has been a wonderful year in many ways, but it has also been a year of tremendous loss to myself and many who knew Judy Perry Daley. Judy was the first female manager in operations at Walt Disney World and had a tremendous work experience, hosting presidents and princesses, rock stars, and movie stars. She truly was one of the most remarkable leaders of Walt Disney World. Together with my friend Joseph Gardner and my longtime friend and business partner, Mark David Jones, we meet up with Danni Mikler, who was Judy's best friend at Walt Disney World. She shares her journey with Judy, where you will learn more of guest relations in those very early days, talks of managing the Candlelight Processional, and of the challenges of opening Epcot with Dick Nunis. Did you know there was no centralized reservation world key system in those first months of Epcot? How about the Epcot circus or President Reagan's inaugural parade through World Showcase? We'll talk about all of these crazy events and Judy's leadership in it. I then conclude by sharing the remarks I made at her life celebration. Judy was truly one of the best leaders at Walt Disney World and a dear friend and mentor. And I promise you this is one of the most important podcasts I have ever shared. So join us as we bring to you the life of Judy Perry Daley, Walt Disney World's VIP. As this is a special podcast, please visit the show notes or the Disney Insights website for announcements and other promotional mentions. I want to focus simply on the podcast. And please understand that much of this is recorded at Steakhouse 71 at Disney's Contemporary Resort. In fact, we closed out their lunch service there. So despite using some good mics, there was more than enough banter nearby than I had really hoped for. And please understand that this is also one of my longest podcasts, but I felt it should be as one whole and not simply something that was a part A and part B. So, without further ado, allow me to turn the mic largely over to Danni Mikler, who will share some of the details of her career as it intertwined with her longtime friendship with Judy. You started in
1976.
and
I had 4 children,
yes,
no health insurance.
nice.
My husband was temporarily not working, and he had the brilliant idea that I come to Disney because he read somewhere that there was free insurance, free medical. So I sold tickets for 3 months and then turned permanent. And Judy Perry Daley was the manager of tickets and guest relations.
She just Judy Perry did?
Yeah, Judy Perry.
Was she your direct report, or was she a couple of?
She was a couple. She was in charge of all guest relations and tickets, and Dwight Dorr had all of transportation. And then there were different people in the park. But so I went because I knew I needed to turn perm. And the only job they had was driving a ferry boat. And I said, sure. And what I didn't know is that they'd only had women in watercraft for, a year. So there weren't a whole lot of women. And I thought she was offering me a job on the steamship in Fantasyland. That's where I thought I was working.
Oh.
But then I was directed to go to TTC and get a sailor costume. And
in the end, you were glad for that, though.
Oh my God, it was a life-changing experience.
Cool.
Yeah.
During these years, did you have any encounter with Judy, or how did you? Did she show up much, or was she just kind of out there?
She was there because I was a CT for 3 months in tickets.
Okay.
So Judy Perry was, again, the general manager for tickets and guest relations. And so I met her on my first day. Chris Parker was was the person that, was in charge of me. And we wore a lovely aqua. You'll remember this aqua pantsuit.
Aqua pants with this little checkered white shirt
Yeah.
that had aqua and gold. It was,
And,
it was like voted like the worst.
And we had a jacket, and it was just
awful.
and
all polyester. It was nasty.
and we
It
didn't
was like
have
a leisure suit.
yeah, and we didn't have knee highs back then, so it was like pantyhose, and with your polyester suit.
Yeah.
So on the first day, the training for tickets was only a day to take tickets.
Yeah.
And my first day, the park was exiting, and Judy came walking in, this lovely lady with this perfect red hair. She looked like a TV star. Came walking out right up to me. And she said, "You will never get tired of watching these guests." And as they leave the park. She stood there with me for about, I would say 45 minutes, and just chit-chatted, found out my whole life story, found out that she was on the board of directors for the zoo.
The zoo, Sanford, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And Betty Duda, who was a cousin by marriage, was also on the board. And Betty was on the Reedy Creek, George. So where Judy, I probably wouldn't have captured her attention as quickly, was very excited when she found out that I knew Betty. Judy was in the area all of the time. She was out there. She knew every single person. She knew that I had 4 kids. She knew we were poor. And she knew why I joined Disney. And so that's when we first met. The second go around was after Watercraft. Toward the end of Watercraft, I became a lead, and Mary Butterworth was the training supervisor. And so she and I, she was a smart lady too.
Yeah.
She and I spent all the time together because I was a training lead. And so it was me and Mary, and there was a supervisor position in Watercraft available. And it was between me and Jim McPhee. And backstory is that on Jim's first day, I was his lead in launches. He was being trained on launches. So I picked him up in the Whaler. He had his pants on backwards because they had those ties. He thought they were supposed to tie in the front.
He was a wild child back then.
Yeah. And so had to send him back to turn his pants around. I think Terry dealt with him too when he did that. But he ended up being a lead. He was a real excellent, in Watercraft.
Well, and for people who don't know, he ended up being an executive with the company.
He ended
a
up
VP
being
of
Epcot.
a good, he ended up being a really good friend, and he became in charge of special events. Was the next time that I encountered him, and then he became the vice president of Epcot. And he would remind me that I was his lead.
Thanks, Jim.
And I was now working for him. So, but after Jim got the lead position, I hated him for a little while. But 2 weeks later, I had to interview with 3 people for a guest relations position. But what I didn't realize is that I was interviewing for a supervisor position in guest relations. But I didn't know it. So I had to interview with Wayne Van de Walker, and I forget who the other GM was, and Judy Daley. And I was so impressed by Judy because she was very, very professional and impressive. She she loosened up a lot. But I was sitting in her office waiting, for my
What year was this when you were interviewing for this
um
position?
probably, oh, it was 3 years after, so it was
39,
78.
78?
Yeah. Because it was 2 years before Epcot opened.
So, so when did Judy go from being your coworker to becoming more of your friend?
After I became a supervisor in guest relations, and I was scared to death of her in the beginning. I feared her. If I saw her walking towards City Hall, I would go out the back door, and I just and even after that experience in tickets, once I got into guest relations, I realized who Judy was, and what kind of responsibility she had, and she, because she was a female working in an all male environment, she was the only female um, executive in operations, park operations. So, but 1 year, after my first year of being, after I got promoted, and Judy Bryle was the um, manager of guest relations at that time and reported to Judy. Um, I became responsible for Candlelight after my first year because I got promoted as a lead. And but I was so happy that I got trained as a tour guide. And Jeff Bachman was my trainer. And no, Heather Eberhardt was my trainer, and Jeff Bachman was checked me out. And they're called Big Brothers. Do that. But I got in trouble my first week of just in costume because my hair was long and I didn't have a ponytail, and I had my hat on wrong, and my skirt was too big. And that's when I met Greta Verity in costuming. And she was very, very close to the guest relations team because they were photographed a lot, and, in a lot of events, stuff like that. But the Christmas that I had Candlelight, I was just running around having a heart attack because our job was to seat all the dignitaries and celebrities, and it was a huge responsibility. We had to know who every single executive was, and they had to be seated. And then Judy created this operational magic, which is when I started admiring her. If we seated all the VIPs and there were empty seats, instead of opening the ropes and letting people pile in, she would have the tour guides go out, find an elderly couple, find a disabled couple, find a family with small children. And that became one of my favorite things to do in in Candlelight. So we got through that first Candlelight, and Rock Hudson was the speaker. And it was over, and they always had a reception in the supervisor's office in City Hall. So they'd have whoever the celebrity was back there, and so it was my job to make sure that food and beverage had everything ready for the reception. Well, I poured a cup of coffee and added cream, and it curdled. And Mim Flynn was the supervisor in charge of that reception. So she'd have them take the coffee, and I did this 3 times before we realized that I was pouring the cream into hot apple cider. And Mim was ready to kill me. It took a long time for her to get past that because I was a guest relations idiot, basically. So, but after the reception was over and everyone was leaving, Bob and Judy and I were in front of City Hall, and Bob was thanking Judy, Bob Matheson our vice president, and he was thanking Judy for a great job, and Judy shook her head, put her hands out, and backed up 2 or 3 steps so that he would know that I was the one that did it. That's when I thought, you know what, that is pretty cool. And then she told him about my relationship with Betty Duda and my time in watercraft. And Bob said, it has to be, I don't know how he worded it, but he said it has to be some adjustment to go from watercraft to guest relations. And it really was. I mean, that.
What year was that?
It was right before Epcot opened, so it was probably 79. Yeah.
82.
Yeah, 82. Epcot was, but the opening team went over there at 80.
Yeah.
So I was there at 79.
Groundbreaking was 79, I think, right?
Yeah. And Judy, once I wasn't fearing her and starting to really, really respect her, I tried to shadow her as much as I could. And there'd be events, and I would always stay near her. I would be nearby, and if she needed something really quick, I would go do it. If a stanchion needed to be moved, I'd find, someone from... I have to tell you, my favorite thing about Candlelight is that all day long, the Main Street team would be working, putting stanchions all the way down and around the castle and everything. And they would be like sweating like dogs. And at about 6 o'clock, they'd disappear. You wouldn't see any of them. And then they would come out in fresh costumes and, then do the crowd control. And then the 20 tour guides that were going to be part of seating and greeting and all of that stuff would come out perfectly groomed.
No sweat at
on
all.
the step, no sweat. No, that was not allowed. On the steps of City Hall, they would all, remember this is close to the 80s, they would all, those that had, because they had VIP costumes, so they didn't wear hats, they would all flip their hair up and flip it back. And then we would have already walked their positions and they would know where to do. And they did an awesome job of knowing who, the executives were. And once you got them in their place, once their hair was right, they were good to go.
Once their hair was right. And
But,
I remember in 79, during the groundbreaking for Epcot, that's where I met Judy. And I was with the character department, came over to be part of the photo shoot and all that kind of stuff. And I remember seeing Judy there, and that's when she had that. You remember that sports car she had? That little sports car.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was a Alfa Romeo or some very exotic sports car, and I was enamored with that. I was thinking, who's that woman with the giant red hair flying down that sports car around property everywhere? And but she wasn't, and she definitely took control wherever she went. And it
even the last words she said to me. The last words that she said to me was, "You need a haircut." Those were my last words from my best friend for 40 years. And she could barely move her arm, and she reached up and grabbed my hair and said, "You need a haircut." And I thought, there has to be more than this. But then I thought, no, it's me and Judy, and that's... She didn't want me going to her memorial service.
Yeah. Everything was on her terms at all times. My first impression was, again, I saw how everyone straightened up when Judy came in the picture. And it's because she demanded that kind of respect. I mean, she was very operational, which I loved. I'm an operations guy at heart, so I really gravitated toward that side of her. And it was interesting to see over the years how she mellowed in some ways. I mean, she was always operational, always attention to detail, always, that
But
kind
her
of thing.
sense of humor came out.
Yeah, her sense of humor came out. She laughed more. I mean, her laugh is one of the characteristics that people remember most about Judy. And but I didn't hear her laugh too much in the early years that I knew her. And it was only until, I left my first tour of Disney in '88, and I came back in '96. So it was only after '96 that I really heard that, like, from the bottom of her gut laugh that she had. Which always, to this day, it makes me smile. I can hear it in my head. But early on, she would drive like a maniac around backstage areas at Disney, screaming around corners in that little sports car. And I always wanted to get a ride in that, and it wasn't, it never happened. I'm sorry to say, but
it wasn't fun.
But it wasn't fun. Yeah, I can imagine. The way she drove was like a bat out of hell. It was unbelievable how. But because she had her hands in everything.
Even as she got older, she always had a big SUV, and she would always back into parking places and do these things.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's Judy. But I remember when she had to give up her sports car because Christopher was coming home. That she had really split feelings about that because she loved that car. But yeah, I remember the groundbreaking in '79, and then the next time I worked with her, around her, I was on when Epcot opened after Tencennial. You'd see her around with other things, but never got really a chance to talk with her until '82.
Mm-hmm.
When we did the opening, and as you recall, in '82, everybody, I was a supervisor at that point, and everybody was doing double shifts. It was your shift at the Magic Kingdom, and then which shift are you picking up today at Epcot? And we did that for like a year.
Especially in your department.
Oh yeah, it was crazy. And then,
which department were you in at that time?
Well, actually, at that point, I had moved in '82, and Danny, remind me, when did I think guest relations was clumped with tickets and admissions and the pet care group and all of that, but then it got separated, then it came back together. But I think earlier in the early '80s, like '82, it was all together, I think.
No, it always was tickets and guest relations. Admissions was John McCarthy.
Yeah.
And tickets, I can't remember his name, but he was always in charge of the golf tournament. And
I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name either. But and the pet thing was also part of the.
Oh yeah, Judy had
because
pets.
Kathy loved working there.
Yeah, because.
But
well, the pet thing belonged to guest relations because Judy wanted the kennel.
Yeah, and then but I went to. I did the guest relations thing when they were all, and we would bounce around from tickets to guest relations, and I was doing some work at transportation, that was again one of the funnest. I've had several opportunities to work with different fun groups, but that is a unique animal, the transportation group, and I worked with Judy a fair amount then. But after that, I shifted over to Epcot, when I was working with Roger Stevens.
Yeah.
And some of all those folks. They were at Judy's funeral.
And I was there.
Terry
I was the opening supervisor for guest relations,
Yeah.
and Chris Parker was for tickets.
Yeah.
So we went over. Went over. I think about 6 months before opening, and we had this trailer, this operations trailer, no desks. It had a copy machine. We would bring our own stuff, put our name on a piece of paper on the wall, and that would be where our stuff was. Then there became a debate about Epcot diverting from Walt's vision. And that's at the point that they were looking at 2 or 3 things. One was the tour, and that's what I can remember. But that's when Epcot Center became Epcot Center, and it was very, very important for us to say Epcot Center. Yeah.
And that was particularly important to Judy. I remember she would go
It
around
was-
all over that. Because
it was-
everybody was saying Epcot, and she would come around and she's like, it's Epcot Center.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
years
that's
later,
because
it was
she
always
had-
Walt Disney World. It was never Disney World.
Well, the other thing, you guys, she kind of almost reported directly to Dick.
Yeah, so she had to be
And,
picture
and
perfect.
she and Bob reported directly to Dick. So, basically anything that came out of his mouth, he didn't say it twice unless he was yelling it over and over again. That, it became obvious, and that's when the idea, WDI, came up with the idea of Epcot being the center of Disney parks and resorts.
Let's just segue. Do you have any particular memories during those Epcot years with Judy that you haven't quite shared yet?
Oh, I have. Yeah.
You need to
Yeah,
share that.
Need to focus on that. So, where do we start? That's when we started being friends, and she started being more open with me about work and the role and all of that, and a lot of it was personal. But Judy was in a situation where she had been in that role for such a long time. And in order to move up within the company, I think it was determined that she needed more operations experience, like operations, attraction. And when Judy and I were at the main entrance, Valerie Todd, who was Valerie Kemp, who passed away, she and Judy and I hung out together a lot. And she was, like you described, she was funny. I mean, she could be tough when she had to, but that was less and less at Epcot. And one of the biggest challenges that I worked with Judy on was when no one was able to get reservations at any of the restaurants because they all required reservations. There was no walk-in. And we're the ones that Bob had just told Judy, fix it. And there were several projects that that he knew that she could do. And the decision was made. And I don't know if any of you remember this, but we set up tables in Earth Station.
Absolutely.
And there was a sign on the front of each table that WDI pulled together at the last minute with the name of the restaurant. There were stanchions and queue areas. And Judy's had this visual mind where she could envision something technical and see how it was supposed to work, most conveniently. And so she and I were doing that, and we got that all set up. The most challenging person to work with on that was Jim Athanas, because these were his restaurants, and we were the ones that were going to get them to the restaurants. So he was very vocal, and he worked closely with Judy, and eventually I. And I just remember the day that it opened. It was slammed. It was absolutely slammed. And restaurants built up, but we started getting guest complaints about not being able to go to a restaurant. So that solved part of the problem. So
The reality of that time was people would go onto the screen and talk to a world.
That was before that. That was before that.
The World Showcase thing didn't happen till like a year, 2 years later, maybe.
Yeah.
Into the park.
The World Key. Yeah. Yeah. So no,
So how were they making reservations at that time? Just at the counter at space?
No, we had set up
Go
tables.
to the table and you.
Okay.
Right,
And they were like long tables, except Disney, with apron.
And if you think Rope Drop at Magic Kingdom is crazy on busy days, when Epcot,
they would run to the restaurant. That was what they would
into
do.
the place trying to get into the restaurant just to get
They would
there.
all run to France, basically.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
France and Germany were the places they would run.
I thought,
But before, at that time, was there a place to make a reservation before the day of?
No, you could only
everything
make
was
it.
reservations day of, and
In
it was
person.
you had to run
in
and be
Yeah.
marked to that
Mhm.
place, and then Mark would trip you along the
It
way.
wasn't. Yeah. No,
That's
but
my third
but
shift of
think
the
of
day. Of course, I'm tripping people.
to me, that was when I realized the value of guest relations, and it was very operational in many ways, but it wasn't perceived that way, and we didn't want it to be perceived, as an operation. But we did the table thing. We were lugging boxes of, remember the guide maps in the beginning?
Yes, the dial maps.
The dial maps. We were lugging boxes of dial maps so we could give maps out to the guests and show them where the restaurant was. And it was an operation that started early in the morning. And remember, we didn't have a main street, so we didn't have like 20 guys in black outfits that we could bring in.
Yeah.
So we would, grab a few people from Future World and Earth Station, and we'd have to, set up the stanchions and get everything organized because it conflicted with guests coming off of Spaceship Earth.
Yeah.
I mean, we had to kind of reroute them out, which was not the best place, and it sidetracked World Key. It caused them to, sidetrack World Key. So that's when the decision was made and John Kemp would be the one to tell you exactly when and how they did this, but the reservations, manual reservations, only lasted maybe a month. And by that time, they had gotten World Key set up. They needed more screens, and they needed to make some technical adjustment on World Key to do reservations.
Seemed like it
And
took forever.
Yeah,
Technically.
they had a World Key in Germany. They had them,
At the kiosk there.
or
yeah.
we had them throughout the park, and so that was one of the biggest challenges because it impacted the business of Epcot.
And Judy was very much at the,
And that's
at the
when
lead of that.
Yeah, and that's when we realized that we no longer had a brand. It was basically operational. This earning and learning and living and all of that that story had gone away. And so we were basically getting everything up and operating. Dave has this email, I'm sure he still has it, of his duty manager notes on a night when, the attraction that went down the most was in Future World, and it's the one with the dinosaurs.
Universe of Energy.
Universe of Energy.
Yeah.
It went down like all day,
Yeah.
all night, every night, and every day. Spaceship Earth would go
Yeah.
down a lot. What would happen was that when an attraction went down, guest relations tour guides would be sent to the exit if these guests were detained for any amount of time or had to climb down the stairs from Spaceship Earth and even, walk past the dinosaurs. The tour guides would be there and just automatically hand out
So
comp
sorry,
tickets.
here's a free something.
Yeah, we're so sorry. Please enjoy the rest of your visit and all of that. So it was, in the beginning, it was very operational, but guest relations Judy seemed to be in the center of everything that's happening.
Well, I remember we used to do at the end of every day, at the end of the night, and I usually work day shift at Magic Kingdom, and then I'd go over to Epcot for the evening, and we would end the day like double shifts with a review of like what screwed up and what did we learn today.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the week, we'd have a bigger meeting, and it seemed like every 4 weeks, Judy would be at that meeting. She was there.
Well, and I will tell you, after opening and after everything got organized and things calmed down a little bit and the reservation system was sort of okay, I think that brought to Bob's or someone's, possibly Dick's, attention. I think Judy's operational skills were recognized at that point. And Dave even said, Dave said they're going to send Judy to Future World attractions. And they didn't. They sent her to World Showcase. And it became the end of Judy's career, not because of World Showcase, but because of things that were happening on an upper level. People that were there that, just came in and all of a sudden they were there and they were in a position and we had been a happy little family. And our leaders were our leaders and we knew who they were. That's when the connection from California started also. So,
that's really going into the Eisner era.
Yeah. So,
what she just said, I think is telling. Remember, we talked about this when we were all together, the ends of Judy's career. Judy went on to go do other things, but I have heard this from Judy.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with the job or the people in the job or the people that she reported to or Bob. This was out of Bob's hands. Bob didn't want his office to be at Team Disney. Bob wanted to be at Epcot. And so that's when, and Judy and I would talk every day and complain and stuff like that. But that's another example of a change that was made that was out of Bob's hands.
So I want to understand this. So Bob was really wanting to keep all the team at Epcot in the trench, the executive team in the trench there.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Burbank was thinking everybody needs to be over at Team Disney.
They built this Team Disney.
And they all need to be over there from a strategic point of view.
Yeah. And that's when Judy was smarter than a lot of her peer group because she envisioned the changes that were going to happen that she was not interested in. I mean, she'd had, and she still had in World Showcase, I mean, she had a reputation of being an excellent leader, particularly a female leader. And so she brought me over to World Showcase.
What was her role in managing?
She was the general manager
of World
Showcase. Yeah.
East and West.
Yeah, the whole thing. And then I became the area.
East and West, meaning there was
It's now divided out. It's divided out. World Showcase is East and West. Mm-hmm.
But at that time,
in my line of business.
But at that time, she had both.
She had the whole thing.
Yeah.
She had the whole thing.
So I went over there and with Judy, and it was one of the best things, not because I worked with Judy, but that was one of the best things.
Yeah, because you were so very involved with the world.
Yeah, and because I'd been handing out tickets at Germany and I knew all of the food and beverage managers and, pretty much.
Did she love operations at World Showcase?
She did. She loved the people. We had a circus.
Gosh, yes. And the circus
The circus happened right after I went to World Showcase.
The circus ended up being under your umbrella because it came out of between UK and Canada and went over to Future World.
So
it became your property.
Yeah. So right after I went to the World Showcase, Judy loved this. She said, "Okay, this is going to be your life." We walked behind the UK, and we knew I knew the circus was happening, and I knew the elephants were there. But unlike Judy, I didn't have the ability to connect the dots technically. You know, I was the people person. I knew all of the internationals. I was able to help them get trained and do their jobs. But they are slapping the elephants to make them poop so that they can minimize. So Judy and I are standing there, and then custodial with their buckets.
The
honey buckets.
Honey pots.
They would be outside the gate lining up. And then the big circus, the people in the costumes. Remember that guy with the loincloth?
Oh, yeah. They had the high flying.
The guy.
You're asking three guys if we remembered the guy with the loincloth.
No.
Okay.
So these circus people would come out and get on the elephants, and I was thinking, any minute, the elephant crew will take the elephants, and Judy and I'll go to, Future World, watch the circus. That's when the guest relations transportation people came in, and Judy and transportation with custodial following with the honey buckets, were responsible for getting the elephants to Future World every single day. We would be walking the elephants from UK, which doesn't sound like a long way, but with elephants,
every step is a long,
So, and really, the circus had nothing to do with Epcot. A lot of the things we did in those first few years were not part of the brand.
Do you remember whose idea that was?
Who the hell knows? I just don't know. I just have no idea.
It was what it was.
It was what it was. Everyone loved it, but it didn't bring in additional guests. And it was really kind of cool. But the other thing that eventually started happening is presidential visits.
Right, which
Jimmy
is
Carter
the big thing was the Reagan parade, inauguration parade.
Yeah.
Talk about that, because that was a big Judy
handled
thing.
all of that.
It was snowed in.
It was too cold.
It was snowed in, and they weren't able to do the inauguration parade. And so Disney got the idea, Eisner maybe, got the idea of inviting that parade down there.
And on inauguration day, Joey was born.
Oh, that's cool. But
Just saying.
That was a huge
operational.
So Secret Service.
We lived with
experience.
Secret Service.
They had to have Thunderbirds had to fly over, which is against FAA regulations because it's a no-fly zone above Disney property.
Yeah.
So that all had to, because I was working with guest relations.
And he arrived in the
Marine One on the helicopter had to land on private property
behind
American Adventure. Then they decided late in the game that they were going to we're going to have media. Reagan was going to come in, and there was some kind of delay in that because that was a surprise that he was actually going to show up for some reason, as I recall. But then they had all of a sudden international media. This is back before the internet. International media from all over the world were like, "We want to come down," and so all of that had to get coordinated too.
No, and
so
that was all.
Huge
Judy was responsible for VIP for parks. And I can't remember the name of the resort lady, but I will think of it.
Was this the beginning of Disney Special Activities?
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, it was before it began.
Before it began.
And we inherited the resort piece.
And the resort special activities.
The Secret Service came through and sealed all the roof access
Oh yeah.
around World Showcase.
Yeah, no.
You know, we talk about somebody being on a roof and shooting, and remember this was the second inauguration, if I'm correct. So he had already gone through his. Remember, there was an assassination attempt on Reagan.
Yeah.
That
And the costume
Yes.
employees and all of us, anyone who was working in that area, we had to give, we had, go through security check. And it was a huge, huge deal. And
along the way, do you remember Lucky Roosevelt, the White House protocol woman, the little steel magnolia chick? She was awesome. Awesome.
She was Judy, basically.
No,
Yeah.
what was
Her,
she?
She's the longest, as I recall, she was the longest serving White House protocol to this day. She served under like 4 presidents or 4 terms, I think. But she and Lucky Roosevelt, and she's still alive. Really? She's like 150 years old. She's still alive, Lucky Roosevelt, and she was President.
Give it a year or two.
Yeah, President Reagan.
Okay, sweetie.
Yeah,
It'll probably be another hour before I leave
President
here. I did
Reagan's
interview.
chief of protocol, and she was the one that once the president, as I recall, and you may remember this differently, Danny, but
She was small, also.
it was going to happen. It was going to be like this thing with the bands and all that stuff. But then it wasn't until later that President Reagan said, "Yes, I'm actually going to show up." And it was at that point
That changed.
they were not. It was like, I want to say like 8 weeks out, or wasn't. I forget. I remember it wasn't much time, and everyone was scrambling, especially with the media, with the Secret Service.
And that, to me,
Lucky
that's just a
Roosevelt was the one that-
haze of
Yeah.
just a haze of going everywhere and doing everything.
It's like
And
18
A
hours.
bulletproof
Yeah.
stand
18
for the
days.
president.
yeah,
But
it
you
was-
know, just you talking about the presidential lineup right now, and again, maybe it's because my head is going back to the
yeah,
standardization of things. But if Nixon was the first in that lineup,
yeah.
what you all were doing protocol with Nixon was kind of the first time, right? Like
Yeah.
like you were testing it out,
Well,
and then you had to test it again with Carter.
I think Carter was the first because he announced Epcot at
did?
this. We had this event at the Magic Kingdom. It was
It was here in the
international-
Contemporary Resort where he made a speech.
Well, he also made a speech at the Magic
Nixon's
Kingdom.
"I'm not a crook" was he?
No. This is different. This was
Carter.
the International
ICC.
Chamber of Commerce,
Yeah.
and it was in 77, 78.
79.
Was
Yeah,
it
it was right.
that
before,
far?
It was right before we went to
So
Epcot.
we had
78
already
or
gone through
79.
several iterations of what Epcot might be,
Yeah.
but Imagineering WED had finally decided kind of this is
Yeah.
what it's going to look like, and they used that opportunity with Carter to kind of launch the more Epcot's center experience to be located where it ended up, because originally it started at the TTC and then it moved as a concept over there.
And he came on several visits. He felt like it was his, it was so funny because usually he would have a 2 or a 3 day tour. Judy would take the first day, and then I would take the second and third. He was my favorite president from a personality standpoint. He's like someone that you could live with.
And their wives were with them.
Yeah, and he had the whole family and a friend of his daughters, and I was supposed to stay next to him as per Secret Service, but I would say we're headed toward this, and this is what the attraction is, and yada yada, and he'd say, check with Roz, she's in charge. So I'd look at Secret Service, he would not, I would go find Roz, and I ended up staying with Rosalind, and she was awesome. And it was a very down-to-earth family. It was like any family that we would take. And I had Muhammad Ali on tour, too. Just saying. He was one of my favorites.
So, as a point of clarification, Judy, with the support of Danni, hosted a number of U.S. presidents and former U.S. presidents, starting with Richard Nixon all the way through George Bush Jr. Um, I should also mention that Danni was right. President Carter made his official remarks for the International Chamber of Commerce in front of Cinderella Castle at Magic Kingdom. Later, though, President Carter had an opportunity to see what the Epcot experience was going to look like when he was escorted by Card Walker over at the Contemporary Resort. And so it was kind of a multi-set of events that were occurring during that time. I have to also mention, we were seated near an older couple dining next to us when we were at Steakhouse 71. They kept looking at us, and I felt maybe we were interrupting their dining experience doing this interview. It turns out that when we got up to leave, he turned to Mark and mentioned that he had worked at Walt Disney World in the early years and that he thought Judy was a great leader. What a coincidence. Well, here are my thoughts that I shared at Judy's life celebration. I wanted to share them with you. It's a privilege to be here and to celebrate Judy's life. Unlike many of you, I didn't come up through the ranks of Disney, having been a Jungle Cruise skipper or having worn plaid. I knew a lot about Disney and had a library of Disney books I scoured and had been to the parks over the decades many times. But I knew nothing about the culture of Disney or the business of Disney. I was a larger-than-life guy at the center of a Venn diagram where naivety, cluelessness, and idealism all came together. It is in that junction that I first met Judy, not as a manager, as the person in charge, but someone who took me under her wing as a mentor, coach, and friend. I was talking to Jeff Soluri the other day, and with a thumbs up said, if Judy was on duty, everything would be good. Now, I know enough about how, in her earlier times, she could be a really tough cookie. But for me, when Judy was in the house, it was all good. She taught me so much, and we enjoyed laughing together. More than anyone, she could define what a great guest experience was all about. Walking through the parks, she would bring things to my attention I had never thought of. And she seemed to know everyone. We would continually chat with people in the trench, gleaning information, identifying a guest speaker, or creating new ideas for participant experiences. She knew the park, and I had the singular privilege of witnessing and learning it from her eyes. Judy would talk about VIP service, and of course, she herself hosted presidents and princesses, rock stars and movie stars. Of all those experiences, the one that truly stood out for her was Princess Diana's second visit. Having been through a divorce, having two boys soon to become teenagers, and being surrounded by paparazzi and entourage, Diana yearned to know what it was like just to be a mom who could take her boys and spend a day in the park without any other care in the world. Judy made that a reality, moving the family behind the scenes, keeping attractions open late, and allowing Diana to just be a mom. Prince Harry, a couple of years ago at the Invictus Games, spoke fondly of how much they went on Space Mountain for hours, like 16 times in a row. Judy emphasized that it was not so much about being a very important person, but a very individual person. And she held to that principle, especially in her time that she spent with me and my wife and daughter, knitting scarves for my wife and creating butterfly homes for my daughter, Madison. Her VIP service was truly individual, but delivered in a way that made you feel like a very important person. By the way, the term VIP had a whole new meaning after she retired. VIP was now very important, very individual poultry. And with the chickens she owned, who were named Batman, Russell Crowe, and even Prince Harry, she knew how even to make the chickens she had on her little estate feel like a VIP? I asked Mark David Jones and Joseph Gardner the other day what was the first thing that came to their mind about Judy. Without hesitation, Joseph mentioned the same thing that I had initially thought. Now, please understand, Judy was organized. She controlled her controllables. She had lists and attended to every detail in our programs that we taught at the Disney Institute. She planned her work and worked her plan when it came to the programs we delivered. But after all of that, after doing everything she could possibly think of, she would all of a sudden take us by the hand and, stepping backstage or behind a set or somewhere, offered a prayer just before the program. She knew that there were things she couldn't control, and those things she put in God's hands. The things she couldn't control were ultimately the things that took her life. But I assure you that Judy is alive, and that in heaven, everything speaks is now the new catchphrase. If she had to go ahead of us, she knew that she would need enough time to make sure that when we got to the other side, it would be all set up just right. She's making her lists, paying attention to the details, and making heaven a little better before it opens its doors to any of us. I know that because I saw Judy bring a little bit of heaven to others on earth. In my eyes, Judy was truly Disney's VIP. Well, in summary, those are a few of my thoughts. Thank you for joining us for this special podcast and hanging through all of this. Thanks for joining us. Wherever you go, find the second star to the right and keep going straight on till you reach it. Follow the compass of your heart and know that with a smile and a song, a little faith, effort, and pixie dust, your dreams can come true. After all, if we can dream it, we can do it. Until next time, bright suns, we'll see you real soon.